She is a specialist education and well-being consultant and the founder of Amazing. She works within all school. She has worked within all school sectors from early childhood to tertiary, business, and for non-profit organizations to improve leadership, learning, and well-being. She is also an outstanding coach and family consultant, working holistically with students at risk from preschool to year 12, their families, and their support network. Her extensive research and expertise for over 35 years in education well-being and digital learning led to the development of human literacy as a progressive human-centered approach that holistically transforms leadership, teaching, learning, and well-being within and beyond the classroom to improve our lives and our world. Georgina is known internationally as an inspiring speaker, researcher, businesswoman, philanthropist, and strong advocate for educators, young people, parents, and leaders to ensure long life learning and well-being success. Please give a warm welcome to Georgina Pazzi.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm really, really happy to see you here today. I'm just going to switch my presentation on and hopefully you'll love what I talk about and connect with your heart the way I do about what it is that I'm passionate about and I've been doing throughout my entire teaching career. So you're going to get it in one very short burst today. So I'll just share my screen with you and hoping you can see that. Fantastic. Okay. So welcome to Sustaining Our Future as a Human Literate World. I'm really delighted to be here, and when I do present here in Australia, what I do like to do is I'd like to start off with something that we do that's very important and dear to our heart here in Australia, and that's an acknowledgement of country. And an acknowledgement of country is actually what we do to really, really acknowledge the beautiful Indigenous cultures that we have here in Australia that were here many, many, many thousands of years ago. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community, including the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation here in the west of Melbourne, where I'm presenting from today. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. So welcome everyone. And you'll notice too on the left-hand side of the screen, there's something really truly important, because you may know that here in Australia, we did have a referendum recently where we wanted to acknowledge our Indigenous culture in our constitution. Unfortunately, it didn't go ahead, and there's still work to be done here as local and global citizens to recognise these amazing people that we have so much to learn from. And a statement you may want to look for, statement from the heart, that is available on the internet. And this is just one part of that to help us reach to our hearts and really acknowledge and their contribution and their connection to land, people, and the things that we can learn so much from them. So part of it says we seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds and their culture will be a gift to their country. And this is part of the whole statement from the heart, that we are working really hard here in Australia to acknowledge, support, and also as global citizens, we need to all make sure that whoever these beautiful people are in every country that are Indigenous, we connect with them, we acknowledge them, we accept them, and more importantly too, we learn from them, because we have so much to learn from what they know about our humanness and humanity and the planet itself. So welcome everyone. Now, the first thing I want to share with you is a question, and I would love you to actually answer that question on this chat. So let's just say you've had an opportunity to teach a child only one thing. That's all you get, just one thing. What would it be? I'd like you to write it up on the chat, please. Off you go. What would it be if you only had one thing? Just one thing. Thank you. Anyone else? Don't be shy. You can go wrong. There's no right or wrong answer here. Give it a go anyway. Thank you, Max, as well. Okay, some of you may still be thinking, and that's okay, but I'm going to share something with you that's interesting. And even with the answers that we have here, let's have a look at the things that I've discovered. I've asked, actually, over 500 educators about this question. I'm just wondering why. Just give me a moment. Okay. I've asked 500 plus educators this question over since 2008. And the response I asked them is, what was it? Was it personal or was it academic? And 95% of the time, these educators and leaders as well gave a personal response. And if you have a look at even what we've got here at the moment, you'll notice that the personal comes out really strong. And then my question is, if the personal is something that we all have in common here, why is the academic so much stronger in what we do in education if the personal is our first place that we go? And so when we look at the education system, past and present, we actually realise that, hey, the academics have been very strong for many, many years. And I'm not negating their importance. I'm asking about their relevance in terms of everything else that we need to be looking at. And we know the high stakes testing and the content and the tests these students go through and all those things that happen. We understand that, hey, is this the way that's going to lead us to human flourishing? Also, when we look at the children in our homes, we are noticing more and more they are living in challenging home environments. And I don't know about you in your country, but I know here in Australia, we are facing quite a lot, especially since the lockdowns that we've had here, especially where I am here in Melbourne. We've had the longest lockdowns during the time that COVID began. And we know that through that, our parents have been struggling. And so students are facing challenges at home like never before. And instead of blaming and getting upset with our parents, we need to realise they're going through a lot of struggles too. And so are our students. So they're coming into our schools having been exposed to things that perhaps they shouldn't be exposed to and that have hurt them beyond belief. And it's affecting their learning and their well-being. And you'll notice it's quite a very strong image when you have a look at this too. We also know too that some students don't even get that connection with parents because parents are busy people. And so we might find they're on devices and they're away from those caregivers that give them that human flourishing they need at home as well. So it's quite interesting when we look at the statistics, even here in Australia, and I'm sure in your country you may have similar ones. We know since the pandemic, psychological distress for our students has increased exponentially. It's been really, really high. So we need to think, well, hang on, they are coming into our schools. What does that actually mean? What are we supposed to be doing here when we know this is what they're coming from? So what I want to have a look at is what are we focusing on in terms of our world as well? So we thought of, okay, this is what they could be facing at home. And we know that, academics are very strong, but let's have a look at what we're facing in our world in different ways. So there's quite a few things that are affecting us at the moment, whether it's war, poverty, global warming, and even students that have, young children that are facing poverty. Is this going to help us if this is the focus that we've got at the moment? Or can we look at other things in the world too? Great things that are happening, such as, yes, there is an abundance of food out there. We need to get it to the right places. Yes, we are looking at different ways to support us with climate change. And also our families are quite diverse, and we may be in blended families where we can learn so much more. The last two I've got down there too is just where I live, just down the road here. I'm near the beach, and every morning when I walk, seeing the sunrise, sometimes it's hidden, but seeing that beautiful sunrise reminds me that every day is a new day. And even in my world too, you'll notice here I am with students where I'm asking them the question, how do we create an ideal world? And this is for me wearing a different hat, because I'm also, with my business Edge Amazing, we're also a B Corporation. And a B Corporation is an ethical business. So we stand for social and environmental impact in the world. So everything we do is ethically based. So there's more and more of us growing in the world, because we are about making changes through business in the lives and the social side of who we are, and to help with human flourishing as well. The other one I want to put in the middle is sometimes some people look at artificial intelligence and say, hey, that's a great thing. And others say, I'm a little bit worried. So it's the way we actually look at this information in the world and the way we connect with it that really, really makes a difference to how we can flourish as humans in the classroom as well. So no matter what we experience, whether it's a negative or a positive experience or something in between, one thing we need to understand, that change is inevitable. We are not going to stop change from happening. But what we do need to do is flourish in that change as humans. But how do we do it? What is it that we do? Now, my question to you is, what does human literate mean to you? Now, think about that. You may want to put it in the chat. So think about, what does human literate mean to you? I'll give you some time just to think about it, and please pop it in the chat. Okay, let's just have a look at what it actually is. And yeah, being yourself, being unique, I can see that. Yeah, knowledge of being human. Yeah, that sounds pretty right, doesn't it? Well, okay, let's have a look at what it actually is in the way that we work. And every time I go to the other side, I have to do something with my computer to get you back. Okay. So human literate is actually mastering human literacy. You would have heard of digital literacy and all sorts of literacies, but this is the literacy of being human. And we want to master that. But mastering instead of mastered is really what it's about, because we're continually mastering, we're continually growing, and things are continually changing. So human literacy is the ability to understand myself holistically and use this to transform my learning, my life, and the lives of others. It's vital that we use human literacy to understand the whole student and support them to understand themselves as well. So know their why, their what, and their how, because that's what's going to lead to transformation and flourishing. So what represents the child, the whole child to you? Now think about this. I know I'm asking a few questions, but it's really good to gauge where your thinking is. If human literacy is about the whole child and understanding the whole child and them understanding themselves and making a difference in the world and to their lives, what's the whole child? What could that possibly be? Please add it to the chat. Okay, I can see some people still thinking about it. I'm going to keep going. It'll be keen to know what you think as we're going as well. I'm going to now flow into what that is, but it's great to know some things about learning as well as we look at the whole child. There are actually 4 dimensions of learning, and I've been doing this work now for so many years. And I realised many years ago that, and as technology evolved too, there are 4 dimensions of learning, especially in the physical and the environmental world for our students, that we need to be familiar with when we're addressing the whole child. The first one is what we call offline. So we use the term line to actually make connections. And that is looking at, the offline means all their senses, the real world in their world, where they actually are, in a face-to-face connection. So the offline part of learning is really, really important. Obviously in classrooms where the physical environment is for these students, that's a really important place too, if students are in that type of an environment. The other one is online. So that represents the virtual world, digital connection, artificial intelligence, even when it's actually online and not in our environment. So we need to understand that's another place for learning, and that's another place they connect with. The third one is what we call cross-line. That is actually the merging of the two, online and offline. And what that looks like is it's augmented, mixed, or artificial and real. I thank you for your response too, Gianna. I really, really do appreciate it. So yeah, augmented, mixed, artificial and real. So I'm just looking at the right upbringing, the right education and life skills. And what does it mean by the word right? And that's another one to think about and ponder with too. So thank you so much. And what we're looking at here now is cross-line. We are now in a world where we are mixing the two far more than ever. So what's that going to mean in terms of learning? How are we going to learn? How is this child going to flourish? And then what happens is, as they take in that information, it goes in line. It goes within their senses. Whatever they're experiencing affects them in some way, their learning, their well-being, and what it is that they do with it. And from that information, when they absorb that information in learning, then, and that's what we call the receptive experience, we have the expressive actions. So part of whatever I'm experiencing in my life is about learning, okay? And from that, I'm expressing what it is and my understandings of it. And it could be in a helpful way. You say that with our younger students, helpful or a hurtful way, depending on what my experience is and depending on the skills that I actually have. So it's a vital thing to understand. The other thing is, this is something for me that as a neuroeducator, I really think that every teacher needs to know how the brain works. And I know we had, the other night, we had Dr. Anantha talking about the brain and neuroplasticity. I'd also like to look at the brain in terms of how it works when it comes to well-being. Because if we don't understand how it works, we're not going to be effective in what our students need in terms of their human literacy, okay? So we look at it from the bottom up, okay? So from the bottom up, when we look at it, we can see we have what we call the brainstem, because it works from the bottom up. Everything children experience, their brain takes it in that way. So the whole idea is here, the brainstem is first, the primitive brain. That's where it's more of a physical experience because of the senses and safety and where their environment is. And the motory side of things as well. Oh, hang on a minute. Have we got 10 minutes to go? I thought I had an hour and 15. I'm sorry. I thought I was here a little bit longer. Maybe we need to check that. I'm not sure what's going on here because I've been told I've got half an hour, but I'll keep going and see how we go. Alrighty, so what happens here is we move from that and then we go to the limbic brain, the middle brain. That's where the social and emotional learning happens. And we need to understand that. But remember, if a child is in brainstem, that actually means that they're not ready for social emotional learning. So in that limbic brain where it occurs, remember, if the child doesn't feel safe or they're not feeling ready to learn yet, they're not ready to socialise and go into that social emotional brain. So then the cortical brain, the top part of the brain, and the executive function is actually where the learning takes place. So the condition of that learning. So the thinking happens here. and the inhibition and the learning itself. So it affects their self-esteem. But if their bottom side of the brainstem, is actually in a very, very ineffective state and not ready to learn, not ready to regulate, it actually affects the cortical side of the brain. So that's really, really important to understand. Now, let's have a look at it in action. The typical child actually has the 4 levels when we're looking at a typical development, okay? So they're in survival the least amount of time because they're okay in what it is that they're learning. Then we have the next part of the brain, and that is the regulation side of the brain. Now, that part of the brain is different. That allows them, once they're out of survival mode, they're able to regulate. So they're able to actually take action in what they need. So then they're ready to the social emotional side of who they are. And guess what? Where are they most of the time? They are ready to learn. And this is really, really important to understand. However, we have a lot of children that experience trauma, developmental trauma. We also have a lot of children that experience anxiety as well. So what does that look like? That now is flipped. So all of a sudden, we're going to see more students, and even since the COVID lockdowns and the experience, that are in survival mode. So those students are not ready to learn. So if they're in survival mode, that physical environment, their physical needs aren't being met. So their ability to regulate their body, regulate their emotions isn't there. And that then affects their social and emotional learning. And what happens with cognition? They are not ready to learn. So we need to understand, when we're looking at being human literate, we need to understand how the brain works, and we need to meet students at their actual point of need, which is really, really, really important. Okay, and I'll keep going. So now we're looking at the whole child. Now, I did ask you that question. What is that whole child? Let's have a look in detail what it actually is. The first 2 that we know are the social and the emotional. So the social part of the child is where we look at mastery such as communication, relationships, and citizenship, absolutely. But then we also look at the emotional, because they work hand in hand, don't they? So emotional regulation, motivation, and empathy. And there are a lot more others as well too in terms of the emotional, but they're the ones that I'm focusing on today because they really, really support what we're trying to do as global citizens too. But there are others that we need to be aware of. There's the intellectual. So the intellectual part of the brain is the academic skills, absolutely, and holistic learning. So academic skills are still important, but without the others, they don't work effectively on their own. So personal best and metacognition and self-regulation are crucial too in terms of the intellectual side. You'll notice I've got self-regulation and emotional regulation in 2 parts. They actually are different as well, and I'll explain that as we go further along. But there are 2 that are missing. Even though we talk about social and emotional learning, there are actually another 2 that we need to be looking at that are really, really important. The first one is the physical. Now, in all of the research that I've been doing over the years, the physical side of who we are is absolutely vital. The physical well-being of our students is absolutely vital, because if the physical isn't happening first, it will affect their social and emotional learning. It will affect their academic skills as well. And so that one there, we're looking at things such as the gut health, because gut health, we're now seeing far more research, has a huge impact on the brain. So what happens is that 95% of serotonin is produced in the gut. So I always say food affects mood. And when it affects our mood, it'll affect our emotions, our social interactions, and obviously our learning too. And the environment that they are in is crucial. Are they in a safe environment? Are they in an environment where they can actually learn and connect with others and do all the wonderful things we want them to do, whether it's an online environment too, or an offline environment, or a cross-line one. And the other one needs to be understood in its entirety. And it does relate to social and emotional learning, but it's what happens through every experience we have. It's the cultural. And I know people will say, but hang on, the cultural, well, isn't that about my culture? Yes, it is. But underneath all that are our attitudes and our belief systems. And our belief systems are pivotal in what it is that we do. Even for us as teachers, what belief system do we bring into the learning as well about our students? The values that come through, and also the resilience. Resilience does associate with emotional, but also resilience is a state of mind. So the mind here is huge in what it is that it can do to shape our success and be human literate through human literacy. So they're the 5 elements. We call them the spice elements. So yes, I'm the spice girl from Australia, but certainly they are so vital in what we need to be human and what we need our children and us to understand and know. So let's keep going and see what else we can do. So you can download this poster if you want. If you go to edumazing.com, just register as a member, just become a member, and in the knowledge base you can download that poster and let students know, yes, our social and emotional learning is there, but also the other 3 are vital, and our belief system affects everything. And I even say to students, okay, let's look at physical. You come into school and you're really tired. Okay, how does that affect you emotionally? And they'll tell you straight away, how does that affect you socially? And they'll tell you, oh no, I'm not going to be very social because I'm really too tired. Exactly, I'm going to be grumpy, okay? And so the belief system is, I'm not ready to learn. So all that kicks in, and all of a sudden, we actually have a challenge when it comes to the intellectual. They're not going to be as ready to learn. So we need to really get them to understand the importance of this and see it in their lives. Okay, so if we go back to the brain again and look at human literacy, the physical is the first thing we see. That's at the start. So getting the physical ready for students to be able to be in a safe space, ready to learn in terms of what they're eating, what they're sleeping, and all the things that they need in terms of taking in sensory input, then allows them to be social and emotional as well. So they've got that in order too. And so once that happens, they are ready to learn. And you're probably thinking, hang on, where's the cultural? This is the interesting part. The cultural is affected by and affects everything we do and everything we experience. So for example, even in my social emotional experience, even if I have friendships that are not going too well, that's going to affect my beliefs in myself. That's going to affect my mindset when it comes to a challenge that I might have with a social situation, and vice versa. Then that will then present itself with challenges for me. So it's really important to understand every experience our children have, it will affect the brain in positive and negative ways. And we need to help them understand themselves so that we can support and help them to benefit so they can flourish as human beings. So what do we do to sustain our future as a human literate world? Well, I'm going to share that with you now, because this is where we need to take this further. I have been doing this now for so many years, and I'm going to share with you examples of what we've done to turn things around through human literacy and the wonderful things that we're doing. And I can tell you that there's so much to share, and I had to condense it here just to excite you a little bit in terms of what you're doing, but what the possibilities are for the future. And as a visionary myself, yes, I knew this many years ago. This journey started for me when I first started teaching. I won't say how many decades, there's been quite a few, and that led me into my leadership. And I know in the early 2000s, my journey began when it came to looking at the way students learn and all the research I'd done previously in the actual field of human literacy. So first thing we need to understand is we need to stop blaming, okay? We are in a world where we're so frustrated sometimes. It's so easy to blame things. Let's blame social media, blame technology, blame artificial intelligence and teachers and leaders and parents, government, money, even Gen Z or Gen X. It's all their fault. And I sort of think, well, hang on a minute. Technology? For me, I actually was a digital leader too. So for me to sit here and say to you, human literacy is vital, says something. Because I knew from the onset of when I used technology with my students that technology had a place for us. That it's not the problem of technology, it's us as humans that use it that are the solution and the answer to getting things better. So even with social media, even with artificial intelligence, we are the ones that if we are human literate, we are the ones that can make this better. So students can get online and actually converse with others in a far more powerful way when they know how to be human literate. So these are the things we need to actually understand. And what we need to do when it comes to being human literate is we need to shift from blaming to collective human responsibility. That's right. We need to see our responsibility collectively. Imagine if we're all working together in this world in some way. And even if we're doing it within our own community, we have a collective responsibility to use our humanness, to understand our students, to understand who we work with, to be able to shift this paradigm once and for all so our students can finally thrive and be human in a digital world. So what do we need to do with education? Well, I'm glad you asked, okay? What we need to do here is we need to move from an education ecosystem, and I call it an ecosystem because I actually spent 2 years of my completing my thesis, and I looked at standardisation, and I looked at what we did here in Australia and all the high stakes research that was out there, and to be honest, it really hurt my heart in some ways because I could see the research was telling us this is not the way to go. And I suppose in a way I knew that myself. And so we can become a system about the external, the ego, but trying to get scores, trying to be the best country in the world. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. All countries are different, aren't they? How can you compete with someone that's different to you? Or as a nation even? Isn't it better to be the best we can be within our own system? And so we have an education system here that is about externalisation. My thesis was called The Externalisation of Education and the Forgotten Child. And I left my school in 2008. And yes, I loved my school and I loved working with my principal. But the day she said we're about human literacy, sorry, not human literacy, the day she said we're about literacy and numeracy, was the day that I realised I needed to leave, because for me, I was about children and human literacy. So what we have in our ecosystem of education, we have silos. So we do English and we do maths and we do other learning, we call them learning areas, you might call them subjects. And even well-being we do, but we do it in ways that's just in case. We just have a program and we just follow the content, so it's content-centred. This is the plan, this is the curriculum, off we go, let's do that and hope for the best. Well, you know what? That's not human-centred, that's content-centred, that's externalised. We need to shift it to a human-centred ecosystem. We need to be looking at our whole school and do things together and do it from the inside out. So no matter what's happening in our education ecosystem, we need to say, hey, this is our school, this is our place in the world. We want to actually transform from where we are. And we need a human-centred and human literate approach that helps us and our students and our communities to thrive. So we start with the whole child. This is the child that we're teaching. We assess them to understand them more, but we assess them holistically. And we look at their well-being and their learning needs. That's where it begins. So just like the brain, if I know my students, most of them are still at survival stage, why am I going to cognitive stage? I need to work where they're from and teach up instead of teaching down and limiting their potential. So the next one is learning, teaching and curriculum. So we know who the whole child is. Then we look at the learning and teaching and the curriculum that's needed to support them to thrive in their whole side of, or the whole part of who they are. And then we also do it as a community. And this is all just in time, because what we're supporting them with is what they actually need at the moment, not what they might need now or might need in the future. We're looking at who they are. And I'm going to show you how that's worked for us. First of all, we actually look at being self-aware. Human literacy is about self-awareness. So we start off at the top in terms of who am I? What can I do? What are my strengths? And really being self and co-aware. Who's the person I'm working with? Who are the students in my class? Whether we're online, offline, it doesn't matter. What matters is I'm aware. I'm aware of who I am, and I'm aware of that holistically. So socially, I'm aware. Physically, I'm aware. And you're going to support me as a teacher to be able to get there too. Then we look at human innovation. So in other words, now that I'm aware and you're helping me to be that way, I need to innovate myself as a human. I'm not using myself as a human to innovate something else. I am constantly evolving. I'm constantly innovating myself and creating a better version of me all the time, no matter what it is that I choose. Then we look at motivation, okay? So motivation is, well, I know this, I know what I need to do, but I need to be motivated to want to act on my humanness, want to act on whatever it is that I do. So in the learning that we do in a human literacy community, we actually look at the motivation as well. We need to support students to understand, why do I need to do this? Why is this important? Because when they're motivated, they will act. And when they act on their human holistic needs in whatever endeavour that they have, that's when transformation occurs. So we're developing the essential soft skills for the future. And I was really excited last night when Christian Crime mentioned with the AI work that he does, that it's that soft skills that we need. And we've known that in our work for many, many, many years. So human literacy is the key that opens up the door to innovation, transformation, learning, and life itself. And it's through human literacy, not just the social and emotional, the whole child as part of that, because they're important too, yes, but we need to understand the whole. That's how we flourish. So if I was to ask you, and it's okay to go wrong, and you can write this up, approximately what percentage of the adult population do you think are self-aware? So give me a percentage. What do you think? What percentage do you think are actually self-aware of the adult population? And there's research on this too. And this is interesting. 50%? Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Yeah. 20% perhaps? It could be 20, yeah. Anyone else? And you can go wrong. This is another thing we do when we work with students. And this came from a graduate, amazing teacher that I worked with. She had a go wrong attitude. We're okay to go wrong. We're going to have a go anyway. And it doesn't matter if we're wrong, because it means we're going to learn. So this is what we're doing here. We're learning. And it's really great to see people thinking of, oh, yeah, 50, 20. Well, guess what? Oops. It's actually up to 15%. Okay? That's not a lot of people. And that in some ways is quite scary too. And what happens is we're not self-aware because a lot of the time we're either too busy, everything else is important, or we're not self-aware in the sense that we only see some things about ourselves and we don't want to go there. We don't want to do something about it. But in actual fact, we need to be self-aware, because if we're going to be human literate, we need to actually say to ourselves and spend time with ourselves, whether we're teachers, whether we're students, whether we're leaders, whether we're anyone. If we're truly going to be human literate, and if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're going to realise, hey, at that very top level, to get to self-actualisation means I'm actually self-aware. And we need to be working with students to be that way, but also working with teachers. And I'm going to share with you how we've done that. The first thing we're doing that I'm seeing in human literate communities is we're trying to develop social emotional learning, absolutely. We're trying to develop certain skills, but it's the way we're doing it that's giving us surface level instead of deep level. And I'm going to show you the difference. So for surface level human literacy communities, they just do just in case lesson. So when it comes to the child, whether it's a social and emotional lesson or whatever it is to do with those soft skills, let's just do this because, yes, we're going to do kindness today, or we're going to look at resilience. But they're just in case. We don't have data to support. That's what these students need. But at a deep level, we do just-in-time learning. We know our students, so whatever learning they do when it comes to being human literate is exactly what they need at that time. And it makes it far deeper because they actually connect to it, because that's their point of need, just like differentiation. And what happens at surface level is we take in programs And programs have a limited lifespan because we just follow them. Okay, let's do this week, this, that, and it becomes a just-in-case lesson. But when it comes at a deep level, it becomes a holistic, data-informed learning opportunity. So we look at holistic data, not programs. We can take great things from programs, but they need to match the data to make it deep in terms of their learning needs, in terms of being human literate and human literacy. What we also find in schools, and I work with schools all the time, I work with lots of different schools, early years, middle years, senior years, and I can tell you now, I see this a lot, and I've been seeing it for many, many years too. We timetable the well-being side last. So even when I sit with educators and they're planning, let's do reading now, let's do writing now, let's do, okay, and then, oh, well, yeah, well-being, we'll do that at this time. And it's like, hang on a minute, shouldn't well-being come first? And we need to rethink that. So in human literacy communities, such as one that I've been working with for many years now at Miranda Primary School here in Melbourne, we timetable well-being first. We timetable human literacy sessions. And what happens is, and some of you might say, oh no, we should do them at different, we just do them within the learning. We actually do need to explicitly support students to understand, especially in the early years. And that's where I would say, even though there's some great ecosystems coming up and great ones online, such as Surge Hunt's City as a School, which is absolutely fabulous, it's for students 14 years and up. A lot of the work we need to be doing, we need to start in the younger years. We need to really, really support our students as soon as we possibly can to actually understand their needs. And we do that through the work I'm going to be showing you today. So we timetable it at the beginning of the week, and it's non-negotiable. So even if they had Monday was a public holiday, then they would do it on the Tuesday morning. It is essential we start the week with wellbeing in mind, with the whole child in mind and the needs that they have. And then we keep going from that too. In a surface level setting, it's static. And what I find, and I've had educators say to me, oh, we're doing this program, but it's not working. And my question is, but are you actually following it through in all other learning experiences possible? No, we'll just do the session. No, you don't do that. If you really want to deepen the learning, you need to actually do it differently. So we do it in a dynamic way. So whatever it is, whether we discover that, yes, that mindset, they really need to reshape that mindset. And, I believe in the work we're doing in the research, mindset intelligence. If we've got that as the focus, because that's what the data tells us, we will actually have that learning experience at the start, but it follows them through everything they do throughout the week. It's a whole school approach, not just one class doing this. And this is where, by having the experience and then putting it into the learning and what they're experiencing, that's what shifts and develops their human literacy. So also we find too that surface level, teacher facilitate, the teacher actually runs the session. Sure, that happens initially with us, but for us it's a deeper level. It's co-facilitated. So students, and I'll show you examples of that, actually step up and support the learning as well. So they're all involved in that learning. So this is where the human literate side comes into it, because all of a sudden they're realising their strengths, they're using their strengths to be able to support others as well. Okay, then how do we get the data? Well, I'll show you how. We do what we call spice maps, okay? So on the left-hand side, we may have some students that need an individual one, because we have noticed that these students, we need to support them a little bit more. They need a little bit more tender, loving care. Okay, so what we do with those students is we give them individual support. And so we look at their data socially, physically, intellectually, culturally, and emotionally. And there's a set of standards that we actually, I wouldn't even call them standards, they're more masteries and competencies that we look at to actually help guide us. What is it that I'm looking at for social or for physical? And we even do questionnaires for students to give us data as well, so that we know, do we need to focus on cultural a lot more in their belief system, or do we need to focus on the social a lot more, depending on what comes out. And the physical obviously is huge too. The second one here is, and I know you can't see the actual data because I need this to remain a little bit of a secret, because this is actual real data that teachers have done. This is a digital one that teachers use. So they do this twice every term. They just add to it, have a look at what they're doing, and then use that in the learning experiences right across everything that they do. So they look at the strengths of the class, they look at the challenges that class is facing, and then from that, if at each of the elements, the SPICE elements, then they look at opportunities for growth. So what can we do? What actions can we take that address the needs these students have? And on the right side here, you'll see this is a teacher that actually created an infographic of their class. Now and that just gives you visual representations. This is my class. These are the strengths my class has, and these are the challenges, which we call opportunities for growth. And using their strengths, we can then address the challenges that they have. And we look at the one that's the most prominent, brain up. So is physical happening here? We need to address that first, and then that's where the learning happens. And down the bottom, the teacher also does their own. What strengths do I bring as a teacher holistically into this classroom? But what challenges do I face that's limiting the way I'm teaching and supporting these students to be human literate and to improve the data that we're looking at? So this is where it starts. Holistic data tells us this is where our students are at, and we need to address that to support them to be human literate through human literacy. I'll give you an example how it works. We did a questionnaire. This is a year 4 class, and we found from that year 4 class that 55% of girls believe they can succeed. That's not a high number. And 45% of those girls are positive about themselves. 45% of those girls and 69% of the boys valued their uniqueness. So we needed to address, and also there's more to that, 45% of girls and 63% of boys never give up. So there's all these things that we had to address in that data. We thought, no, this isn't right. We don't want our girls, especially here, and our boys, we want to increase theirs too. We don't want them to actually be feeling the way they do, to be believing that they cannot succeed. Even though the interesting part of this is the girls actually, 64% knew their strengths, but 55% of them actually didn't believe they could succeed. So there is our data. What do we do with it so they can become human literate, so they can flourish? Well, we set up a learning experience. We call them innovation meets, and the reason is we're innovating ourselves as humans. So this is our chance. We meet together on a Monday morning. We address the data with them as well, and we have leaders that support us in what we put together. And then we did a session on my own superhero. This is Eleni's work. And what Eleni did through the experience, she wrote down what she can do to succeed and be a superhero in the different contexts. So she did it for the classroom, the schoolyard, the home, and even online. She had there her blueprint for what she could do to feel successful as a superhero. So in the classroom, obviously this is what she was doing, but it wasn't just for that session. It was throughout the entire week and beyond. When she was in the schoolyard, we actually, before students went out, we went through what is it that you can be doing before you go out in the schoolyard that you've got there to be your own superhero, and so on and so forth. And even they had to share that with parents at home too. So this is where we actually can really transform and support our students to grow. And this is how we use the data. And so when we're looking at this, we're guided by holistic data. And if we've got a program, instead of following it religiously through, have a look, has it got something to do with self-belief and the cultural element? Then use that, because that's what they need at that time. And that's where the growth will occur as well. Okay, here's some other examples. What we are too, when we're human literate, we're reflective and responsive in a human literacy ecosystem. So everyone in that ecosystem is involved in reflection and being responsive to that. So students have their own mastery journals. These are just examples of them reflecting on their learning. Sometimes we'll do mind maps and we'll do it differently. We have digital ones as well if students are not quite ready yet to actually write it, or they have challenges in their writing. We don't want them to stop reflecting, and we do it in different powerful ways as well. And even down the bottom, we had the art teacher. She wanted them to reflect and look at their kindness, because that was something that she felt the cohort of students, and so did the teacher, that in their data, these students needed to understand what kindness is and how they were towards each other. So there was their evidence, because they reflected on what it was that they were doing, and it's visual evidence, yeah, this is what we actually did. Another example here is our teachers. So this is our students. I'm going to get to the teachers in a moment. What we actually did is, this is a session that I modelled in the classroom, so teachers knew how to work with students as a coach, and we did what we call collective co-awareness and action. So in our reflection, to understand our humanness and what it is that we bring, we looked at above and below behaviours, and why is it that it's better we progress when we're above, but we regress when we're below. So students came up with all sorts of ideas to act on after reflecting on what they could see that their above or below behaviours were, to be able to action throughout the week and weeks to come. We also had students in classrooms, they had their own name. They create their own sense of belonging. So this is the Fearless Fives, and this is a Year 5 class, and they had a way of being. So they said, we have a passion for lifelong learning. We wish to inspire the future generations. We display the 4 R's, which are the respect, responsibility, it's the values of the school, and other class, all teachers want to teach. Now imagine having that in your DNA, being in that class. Imagine what that can do. And this is really, really, really powerful things that we have done. And just one thing I didn't mention too, with the data of that, the infographic, that class, we changed that entire class in 3 weeks by shifting from an academic model to a human literacy model. And where I've worked with over the years, and this has been for quite a long time now, over a decade at least, where I've worked in schools where we've been looking at human literacy, we have shifted the behaviours of students to want and to love learning, because we focus on them as people first. And it does actually make a huge difference in the ecosystem. Now, I talked about metacognition and self-regulation. This is where the emotional regulation it's not just emotional regulation, which is hugely important, no doubt. But when we look at self-regulation and metacognition, they're actually related. Self-regulation happens when it comes to cognition and metacognition, because I am constantly regulating my thoughts and cognition, how I'm acquiring my knowledge, how my experiences and my senses, and then after that experience, my metacognition, so knowledge about what it is that I did, the content, the task, the strategies, and then regulating that after that process. And we talk about not just planning what I did, or monitoring what I did and evaluating what I did. I'm always about action. If we don't act, it's just knowledge. And if it's just knowledge, it means nothing if we don't take action. And it also means students won't remember it as well, because they haven't acted on it. But above all of that is self-regulation itself. We talk about not just emotional regulations, which I'm sure you know a lot about. We talk about behaviour itself. What behaviours am I displaying that I need to regulate so that I'm ready for metacognition? But we also have mindset there too, because our mind is crucial in everything we choose to do. And if our mindset is regulated in a way that we can improve our learning, improve our relationships, improve the way even it connects back to emotions too, we also will be able to improve the learning that we do in so many exciting ways. So this is really, really powerful thing to do. So reflection and responsiveness really, really makes a difference. Now, let's have a look at this. Now, I talked about we need to start with younger students, because the younger we start, the more human literate they'll be, to the point where they're going to be making better decisions, be more connected with their learning, and be more vital in their lives. So here is a Year 1 class where they had it, and this is an author's chair, and the child shared their learning. This was their mastery journal, and the teacher actually took notes of what we call AAA. Now, AAA is something that we've created in our work, because a lot of children, a lot of people use 3 stars and a wish, and I'm thinking, or 1 star and 2 wishes, all wishes, wishes, wishes. And I'm like, I can wish for a lot of things, but if I don't act on it, the wish means nothing. So we completely turned things around and looked at, what did I achieve? That's the star. What attention do I need? So what in all of this, let's reduce the cognitive load. What's one thing that I need to focus on next? So what needs my attention? And then action. What action will I take to make sure it happens? And you can download this if you go to edgeamazing.com. Just become a member, it's free. You can get into the knowledge base and download it as well. So what happens here is these students in year one have a job to do. Not only are they listening to the information, they're also giving feedback. So in this case here, if you have a bit of a look, it says, that there was a good sentence because it had detail, was there that what they achieved. But the other one for attention was needs to speak a little louder. And then what the third one said is, okay, if they're not speaking loud, they must be very confident. So their feedback there was believe in yourself and just try to have a look at it because you can do it. Now imagine a year one student saying that in the classroom. And what we're doing is we're modelling ways of supporting one another. We're modelling human literacy. We're modelling the importance of the cultural element and understanding that as well as part of the learning, which is very exciting indeed. The other thing we have too is we have human literate teachers. So not only do our students have to be human literate or need to be human literate, our teachers do too. And I can't tell you how many teachers I work with. A lot of the time it's the behaviour strategies that they need that I work with now and the challenges that they're facing. And so I support them with those, and students that are neurodivergent as well, which I absolutely adore working with. And we do that in our family consultancy practice as well. But what we do with our teachers is they need to be human literate. We need to change things around. So teachers ask students for feedback. How's my teaching going? This is a music teacher that did it before they walked out of the music room. So they knew, oh yeah, this is what they like. This is what I need to change. This is great. But we also have reflective professional learning. So this is just an example here where teachers wrote things about themselves that they felt that they needed very strongly in their I am statements in what it is that they wanted to focus on, the human side of who they are. And what we do with that in our professional learning communities, so we want to get the reading data, do we, or the maths data? But guess what? Teachers have to think about their strengths holistically. So what am I doing socially? What relationships do I build with students? What am I doing physically in terms of the environment that they're in? Am I creating an environment here that's conducive to their learning? So they need to think about all their human literacy and do their own spice map to understand their strengths and the challenges that they need to work on, which is really, really powerful. And then from that, the actions come through. So what actions will I take that are the most important for me to shift the way I am with my students, whether it's online or whether it's face-to-face or hybrid? And another thing we do too, we talk about up-learning. I know everyone talks about, unlearning and then relearning. That word relearning for me is like recycling. It's like we're just learning it again. I use the term up-learning. So what happens is, yes, we're learning, we're unlearning, and then we're up-learning. So what we're doing is we're providing you with strategies, new ways of thinking, research-based, holistic, to up-learn, and just as it says there with the handout, develop your teaching superpowers. So we give teachers opportunities to learn about human literacy, and we call it professional mastery. What is it that I can be doing that enhances my human literacy in what I do to be the best I can be, both personally and professionally? Human literacy teachers, now have a look at this. This is this Maramba Primary School, a school that I adore working with. And what they did, they said, yeah, we're a human literacy ecosystem, learning community. What does that mean? What is our reason or our way of being, our raison d'etre? And this is what they came together to conclude, and this is what drives everything they do. And it says, at Maramba, we implement human literacy as a school-wide holistic approach to learning and well-being. Students' needs, strengths, and interests are identified in order to enable targeted teaching that focuses on developing their SPICE elements. These elements are social, physical, intellectual, cultural, and emotional. which form the attributes of a whole child. Through this learning journey, students develop an awareness of self and others. This enables them to be lifelong learners, innovators, and active contributors to society. It creates students that are inspired and motivated to be the best they can be. And this is what drives this school. Human literacy is what drives it. And on the right, you can see teachers will say, okay, culturally, what's going to be our staff blueprint? What belief systems are going to shape what we do? Underneath that is an example. After the COVID lockdowns, when we came back, we asked the teachers, what do you need most right now? And the two things they identified, because they had to be separate for so long, was to experience joy and belonging. So we looked at joy and we said, okay, what joy do you have at the moment? Because everything we do with human literacy is strengths-based, but it's also looking at growth. It's all about what growth we are making. Doesn't matter how small, we're just on the right trajectory to be the best we can be. This is also absolutely gorgeous. This is on the left-hand side, we have parent engagement. We can't do this alone. Parents need to be involved in human literacy. And I know the other night when a wonderful Professor Maria was talking, which I was so inspired by her and what she was talking about, you know, and even through that conversation, it was about, well, parents feel they need to be the ones that do the human literacy. Well, I'm going to say to you right now, I've been doing this for years. There is no way we're going to develop students that flourish without parents also at least being influenced and knowing about it too. And this is parent engagement. This is actually a foundation or prep classroom. It's called My Love Autograph Book. So these students had to take that home and their parents or their grandparents in this case wrote why they love them so much. And so these students were filled with joy, the parents were filled with joy, came back and shared what it was that they loved about them. It was beautiful. The other thing that we do is we have personal, but we also have a class goal depending on what the focus is. And what happened here in that middle one is that they use Class Dojo, and this teacher, amazing teacher, sent a photo of the learning that they did during their innovation meet. And in the early years, we call it the me and you sessions. They're about me and you. How do I support myself and how do I support you and we learn together? And so she sent them the goal for the week, which was to use kind words. So the whole idea is parents are doing it at home too. And that's how we enable that connection to happen. And you'll notice too, home learning motivators, because during COVID and the lockdowns, Miranda Primary School and another school I worked with as well, they did a sensational job connecting parents to what their students and their children needed at home. So we gave them home learning motivators as part of an Imagine newsletter. So these students or their parents had ideas to support them physically in the environment and physically their body at home, their children and themselves. Culturally, what sort of things could they do? Emotionally, and so on and so forth. So teachers are impacting parents and their communication and their participation so they understand how they can be human literate, which is incredibly powerful in itself. Then we looked at, okay, reading, writing and maths. Of course they're important, but how do we connect them to human literacy learning experiences? Well, we do that really well. Within the reading and the writing and even the maths, human literacy is strong. I'll give you an example. Here in one of our local papers, we actually shared an article that was written by one of the editors, and he wrote about Greta Thunberg, and he actually said that some very negative things which violated children's rights. And you can see the red parts of things that he said that completely violated that these students talked about. So there's literacy, reading happening, there's incredible discussions, but also understanding their rights as human beings. So we connect it all together. Underneath, you'll see a student. He was part of a group that facilitated an innovation need experience as well, where students had to look at they had to build something and look at their resilience as part of it. So students lead it because they understand how it works. In the middle here, we have maths, and what can we do there that's different to incorporate human literacy, make it engaging and a real world experience. So we had used Minecraft and used it in a math situation where students built the Sandanopolis village and used area, perimeter, and other maths concepts to be able to solve problems. And underneath that, there's another one, place value mission. This is where students didn't just learn about place value just by looking at the whiteboard. They actually were immersed in a mission where they had to discover what place value was. They had to see how it was used in real life, and they had to also teach themselves how they can improve even more. And we still had master classes where we have students that need support. We still have group sessions to support them with those skills, absolutely. But what we found was the data there with place value actually increased because they were involved in and immersed in real world experiences that were human literacy based. In the third one, you can see going down, these are students that are involved in the discovery part of human literacy. That's STEAM inquiry and human literacy together. So what happens here is you can see that beautiful boy. This was the first time he'd ever done a discovery, and this was the end result where he shared with his classmates and parents the learning that he did to develop a safe enclosure for an animal. But he also talked about the skills that he brought into that too, the human literacy skills. And then we took it back to, well, if you're actually feeding this animal certain things, well, what about in your life? Would you give that animal McDonald's, for example? Oh, no. Well, if you wouldn't give an animal McDonald's, then why do you eat it? What does that do to you? I'm sorry McDonald's aren't there, but we know some things you've got out there are not too good for that body. They might taste good, but they're not too good for it. And underneath there's one of our senior students, and we did a Shark Tank. And the learning that came out of that was absolutely sensational. The maths, the understandings, and the human literacy part of it too. You'll notice there's a book there that I've got, The Knowledge Gap. When that came out, I was super excited. It was the science of reading things, learning that was out there that influenced it too. But we know our students need vocabulary in order to learn to read, as it says there. But the vocabulary comes through human literate experiences. These are the things that actually develop those skills. So reading actually improves through these life experiences in a human literate school. And here's another example out of our discovery. These are students looking at living conditions. They're looking at what's important to them, what makes them mad, sad, and worried. But in this experience in discovery, during and at the end, we have a global impact scale they need to look at. So during is the first column. What impact does my solution have on myself, my peers, my family, and it goes all the way up to the world. And across it, we actually ask them, how effective, how deep was that impact using a solo taxonomy approach? And I can tell you, they already see through what they've experienced and what they've created, the impact what they do has on others, all the way up to a global or a world level, which is really, really exciting. So they're the things we can be doing in this ecosystem. Imagine how these students will flourish. Now, I'm just going to finish off. What are the essentials for success? In the work that I've been doing now for so many years, and I know I'm a visionary, so years ago I knew in education we've got to focus on the human. That's where we're heading. That's what we need to be doing. And the whole is so, so important. But what have I discovered in all the schools I've worked with, what actually works? The first thing I'll say is sustained leadership synergy. I'll talk about the word sustained. What I find is that when leadership changes in a school, so a new principal comes and another one leaves, if the principal is about growth, they're the ones that will sustain the great things that are happening and then continue a journey and improve it further. But there are others that come in and no matter what's going on, they will just drop everything. It won't work, not doing it, we're doing it this way. And they lose a lot of people. So it's really, really, post any questions, yes, thank you. So it really is important to understand that we need to sustain the things we do and grow them no matter who's leading, okay? Because that's how things will shift. The other thing too is leadership synergy. So I always say the best team is a diverse team where we have different minds, but we also need to work in synergy. We need to actually believe in what it is that we're about. So just like Miranda did, what are we about? Even though we think differently, we need to support what we're about. You just need one person on a leadership team that doesn't believe in what the school's doing, that completely slows down growth. So I know that leadership synergy, working together, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, is what makes this work. Another one, as we've looked at, the whole child to community inclusive and active human literacy approach. This is our DNA. This is how we are. We are a human literacy school. We're about being human literate first and foremost. That's in our DNA. It comes out in every part of our school. Now, this is something I did say coaching a few times, okay? We're teaching to coaching. So pedagogy to pedagogy. We need to now shift the way we teach. We need to become coaches because the future, we're going to get a lot of teaching through AI anyway. We need to start developing coaching so that students have the autonomy to learn and grow through our coaching. Another one too is embracing change and uncertainty. So we need to understand, yes, things will keep evolving. We need to say, yeah, we know that. We're going to keep up learning. We're going to keep innovating. This is who we are. And last but not least, we start from within, internal in the school, and out for global impact. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, what's next? Before I go, because I've got one more little thing to do, a little activity for us to do, which is exciting. What's next? We are developing a human literacy learning ecosystem. There is an old one at the moment, but the new one's coming where we want to support schools to know what are the effective practices, just like I've shown you just a snippet of things today, that really work so our students can flourish. Now, you'll notice before I go, you'll notice these students putting their hearts up. What I'm going to do now is an activity with you. Are you ready? I want you now to put your heart, create a heart in front of your heart as I read this, okay? So I want you to imagine a child being born into a human literate family and community, a child that experiences unconditional love and who grows and flourishes by endeavouring to be their best each day, who recognises their strengths and harnesses them to navigate the challenges and changes that they face in a constantly evolving and unpredictable world. A child who believes in themselves and knows whatever they do in each moment can shape a better future for themselves, others, and their planet. A child that respects themselves and others, no matter who they are and where they are from. A child that knows how to nurture their body, their brain, and their environment. A child that is compassionate and proactive and kind in reaching out to others as global citizens, and knowing how to communicate and collaborate with empathy. Imagine that you are one of many, which I'm sure you are, that makes this happen for current and future generations to come. It's in our hands and hearts through the power of education. Now I want you to lift up that heart because it's time for human transformation. And this is what I did in a different way with the students at this school. So what I want to say is thank you for having me here today. Let's all unite to create a sustainable future as a human literate world so we all flourish as compassionate and global citizens. So thank you for having me. Please get onto our website, edgeamazing.com, download what you need from today and other things as well, and connect with us on our socials too. So I know we've got some questions. So what I wanted to say is here's a provocation. I'd like for you to join me after this in a yarn circle. I'll explain what it is when we're there. And think about this and we can talk about it and answer some of these questions too. Is it possible to change from a content-centered education system to a human literate ecosystem? Why, how, or why not? So there's something for us to consider. So thank you so much for having me today and for allowing me to share the work that we've been doing for many, many years. Thank you.